All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, this time last year, the owners around Major League Baseball had locked out the players, which resulted in a delayed start to the 2022 season. And nearly a year later, the CBA that was agreed upon by both the players and owners could be headed towards another stalemate when it's up in 2026. One of the current issues at the heart of MLB is the potential bankruptcy of Diamond Sports Group, and that controls the local broadcasting rights for nearly half of the teams around the league. Now, of course, the question is how will MLB solve and fix this problem? And of course, right now it's looking like Major League Baseball is going to pick it up and just be broadcasting the games themselves. That's one of the issues. Um, Another big issue that still has not been resolved around Major League Baseball, that is the gap between the big market teams and the small market teams financially. And when it's all said and done, it could lead to Major League Baseball implementing a salary cap as opposed to its current luxury tax system. Now, the Players Association head Tony Clark has vowed to fight it, and because he talks about the salary cap suppressing players' salaries. Now, one thing that you have to keep an eye on, and that's the Steve Cohen effect. And of course, we know all about Steve Cohen. He's been the owner of the New York Mets for, just for a couple of years. And of course, he's got his fans and he's got his critics as well for his ability and his willingness to spend. And some of his critics have been within the ownership circle around Major League Baseball. And I say that because some of them just don't like him. But my thing is this, and I've said this from the beginning, if the owners didn't want Cohen or they don't like him, why did you vote him in several years ago in the first place? And the other thing is this, with the current luxury tax system, of course, the teams that go over the luxury tax, they have to pay the penalty. And then, of course, that money is trickled down to the smaller market teams. My thing is this, these owners don't have a problem cashing the checks that Cohen is sending them. Now, Cohen's willingness to spend, in my opinion, has also further exposed the frugalness that many owners around MLB have, even some of the owners that operate in the bigger markets, because it's a scenario where, hey, a lot of these guys know I don't need to really quote unquote spend money in order to make money. And some of them have kept it close to the chest. And at the end of the day, Major League Baseball, just like it is with a lot of other pro sports, there's really only a handful of owners that are committed to winning. A lot of these guys are there just to simply collect the check. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, for me, another thing is this. You could say whatever you want about Steve Cohen or a guy like him, but he's good for the sport, especially the sport of baseball, because number one, he's showing that other team owners need to step their game up. While at the end of the day, MLB needs a villain. And at this point, it's Cohen and the Mets. Of course, once upon a time, it was George Steinbrenner and the New York Yankees because of their spending. This time around, I think it's going to be Cohen and the Mets, in my opinion. Now, another question for me is this: if the owners were not happy and they're not happy, if that's the case, then why agree to this deal last year in the first place? I think part of it was to save face because remember, they were the ones who locked out the players. They were the ones who caused the work stoppage. But with that said, they still wanted to try to go out there and squeeze in a season, save face for a couple of years. But I think we could be headed to another stalemate on this subject come 2026 when the current CBA does expire. Now, the other question is, are some of these team owners conspiring to penalize spending even if it hurts them? Because we've seen, several levels to the luxury tax. And now, of course, the quote unquote Steve Cohen tax. But at the end of the day, you got to spend money to make money, and you got to go out there and put a good product on the field if you expect people to support. And putting a good product out there doesn't mean just selling off your good players and trying to rebuild and putting yourself in a hole for 4 or 5 years and expect fans to support you. Doesn't work like that. But at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, where is the state of baseball or the sport of baseball headed? And I've said this before, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but nonetheless, I talked about this last year during the lockout. Baseball is at the crossroads because it's not as popular as it once was. It's not the go to sport, if you will, for the younger generation. Baseball has been surpassed by both football and basketball. And to give you an idea, when we had the lockout last year, there wasn't a lot of people panicking, shedding tears about, wow, whether or not we're going to have baseball. At that point, this time last spring, the focus was on the NBA, the focus was on free agency in the NFL. And you look at it, even in the spring, baseball is not as popular, even with spring training, even with opening day. You have the end of the NBA season coming around the corner. You have the start of NFL free agency leading into the NFL draft. And then if you go further into the summer, where baseball should be front and center, people are still talking about the NBA playoffs. People are starting to talk about the start of training camps around the National Football League. And even going into the fall. Look at last fall. And this is where MLB is supposed to be front and center with the postseason and, of course, the World Series. More focus was on college football. More focus was on the NFL. More focus was on the start of the NBA season. So, for my money, Major League Baseball is just being caught in the wash, and it's going to continue to be like that. I've said it before, and I'm going to continue to say it, not to sound like a broken record, but Major League Baseball, in my mind, does not do a good enough job as far as marketing their players, their star players. And yes, you have nationally televised games on the weekends on Fox. You have nationally televised games on the weekends on TBS. You also have games throughout the week on ESPN. But nonetheless, there just is not that appeal to people for baseball like it once was. So that right there is another problem with Major League Baseball. They have to do a better job getting their product out there and, more importantly, marketing their product. Now, of course, the question is going to be, will there be a salary cap in Major League Baseball? I do believe it's a possibility. The players right now are definitely saying they're not going for it. But with that said, about 30 years ago, Major League Baseball did attempt to have a salary cap, didn't work, was part of the reason we had a strike. And then on top of that, the luxury tax system was then implemented. Now, I think the luxury tax system is good. Things are changing with it. But at the end of the day, it's not a perfect system. You look at it right now, those teams that are getting the money from the bigger market teams, the smaller market teams, they're putting it within their system, but they're not necessarily spending on player contracts. And I think that's the big thing right there. The gap as far as spending goes in free agency. You have the smaller market teams that are operating on a quote unquote minute budget, and then you have teams that are easy to go out there and just go off to the races and spend. Now, with that said, this offseason has seen a team like the San Diego Padres, a quote unquote smaller market team, go out there and show a willingness to spend money, bringing in Xander Bogarts, re signing Yu Darvish, giving the extension to Manny Machado. So that right there is definitely an eye opener for things as well. So it's really going to be interested to see what happens over the next several years with Major League Baseball. They got to try to go out there and refine their product. I know they're trying to make tweaks to the rules, banning the shifts, widening the bases, the pitch clock, you name it, but they have to go out there and find a way to appeal to an audience, get people to gravitate them or get gravitated rather to come and support their product on a weekly basis. You look at it right now. What's the state of baseball in Oakland with the Athletics? Are they going to be there? The Rays look like they're going to be getting a new stadium in Tampa. But at the end of the day, when these teams kind of decide to blow it up and start over, it puts their fan bases in a bad spot. You look at the Chicago Cubs. They fought and scrapped so hard for so many years to get that World Series championship, did it in 2016 with that young core, and none of that young core is still with the Cubs. And you think about it, Chicago, a big market team, those guys should still be in Cubs uniforms. You think back to the Boston Red Sox who won the World Series back in 2018. So much talent on that team, young talent, the likes of Mookie Betts. He got traded. Xander Bogaerts is a Padre. That's not supposed to happen. That right there is an issue at the heart of the problems with Major League Baseball. So it's going to be very interesting to see how these things get fixed, because big market teams are not supposed to have the resets like that. Big market teams are supposed to be able to sustain their stars and keep it going. CJ, how are you doing? Yeah, definitely chatting a little baseball today, talking about the financial aspect of it, and seeing where this thing is going to go, whether or not Major League Baseball is going to add a salary cap at one point or stick with the luxury tax. I know that you're a fan of the Atlanta Braves. The Braves have a lot of stars, young stars on their team. And the Braves, to me, I think they're a team that they could go out there and spend the money to keep their current guys, which they have been doing. But you have some of these smaller market teams that are, for the most part, keeping it closer to the chest. But even with the salary cap, some of these teams have not really done a good job as far as finding and developing talent as well. And that right there is an issue. So I think Major League Baseball, from an ownership standpoint, from a front office standpoint, instead of trying to put it on the players, they got to look at themselves, because yeah, you could have all of the salary cap that you want, but you still have to go out there, find talent, develop talent, and put a winning product out there on the field. You're saying, speaking of keeping players to the Braves, need to extend Max Fried. Oh, definitely, because I mean, you look at it, the Braves have a young core, arguably one of the better young cores currently in Major League Baseball, and you want to try to keep, that machine going, if you will, for as long as possible. The championship window, regardless of the sport, is not open that long. So you definitely want to try to find a way to capitalize on that. The Braves were able to do that in 2021. They're definitely going to try to do it again here in 2023 after a disappointing trip to the postseason. You're saying, I wish MLB would get a salary cap, but I don't know if the players or union will agree to it. The players definitely are not right now, because I mean, you look at it, they've been able to get the system tweaked in order to get to free agency a little bit quicker than they have in years past. And I think the prime example of that is a guy like Manny Machado. Manny Machado, and I talked about this the other day when he got his extension, he's now been able to get two big contracts out there. And in the older days, obviously, that wouldn't have happened even 10 years ago. A lot of these guys, they wouldn't reach free agency to their like 30 or 31, and they have that one opportunity to cash in. A guy like Machado has now had two opportunities to cash in. And I think that is something that the Players Association definitely is not going to go back on. It's a scenario where we have guys who have the ability right now to get $30 million a year plus, and I think it's only going to increase, because once you get a guy like Shohei Ohtani to the open market this time next year potentially, I think Shohei is going to be a guy that could easily covet $40 million a year. So it's one of those where the money is there, but it's just that, losing, potentially losing, that Diamond Sports Group, that's going to be big right there. You still got the Fox money, you still got the ESPN money, the TBS money as well. But I think Major League Baseball is probably going to try to do some more streaming, develop some revenue from there. But at the end of the day, like I said before, if you're the owners, if you're not happy with things, why did you just agree to this last year? I think it would have been better served, even if you took another step back to try to get everything in order so there could be labor peace for as long as possible. But the way things are going currently with Major League Baseball, I think it's going to be a stop and go thing with labor peace because these owners, the ownership group currently is going to consistently be haggling about money. You're asking me, what do I think about these new rules? You're saying I love them except for the runner on second in the extra innings, but I will always hate the DH. I totally agree with you on the designated hitter aspect. I think that having the DH in the American League and then not having the DH in the National League added, you know, it added a little bit more to the game strategic wise because American League teams had to adjust when they went to National League ballparks, vice versa. I think I always thought that there was more strategy involved in the National League game due to the fact that you had to account for the pitcher's position. It also, meant more as far as you having, some utility players on that bench for late inning scenarios. You typically saw managers do the double switches. Double switches are basically being gone from the game now, because of the universal designated hitter. So that was one thing for me that I always thought about. Also, I'm with you. I'm not a fan of players having a guy being on second base to begin the extra innings. They're just trying to speed up the game. But nonetheless, it's one of those where I think so many things have been watered down by the game, and I've talked about this before with analytics. You don't have pitchers going into games as deep as they did once upon a time. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Too many guys out there are worried about throwing 100 miles an hour, and that's why more guys are blowing their arms out, and that's why they can't go as deep into the games as they once did. Everybody is not meant to throw nearly 100 miles an hour with each pitch. CJ, you're a Braves fan, so two of the greatest pitchers that the Braves had in their history, not John Smoltz, I'm sorry, Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine. Neither one of them were hard throwers, but they knew how to locate, and their ability to locate got them to the Hall of Fame. So again, everybody doesn't have to go out there and be a flamethrower a la Nolan Ryan and Roger Clemens. But nonetheless, I do not agree with the late inning rules as far as putting a guy on second base. I don't agree with the wider bases either. But one thing, it's one of those. I'm not even a fan of Major League Baseball banning the shift due to the fact that it's just a fact of it's the result of what happens from analysis paralysis when you overdo it with the shift. And this is why we're at the point that we're at because now, over the last couple of years, we've seen teams literally shift their entire infield from one side of the field to the other. We've literally seen teams have multiple outfielders and do quirky things like that. So that aspect of it is taken away from it. They've overreached with it, and because of that, now you definitely got to scale it back. So it's going to be one of those things. It's going to be very interesting to see where this goes financially for Major League Baseball. Can they get some new television money to kind of offset what's going to happen with the Diamond Sports Group? Because that's a big thing. I mean, again, nearly half of the teams around Major League Baseball are attached to this company as far as their regional coverage. So it's going to be very interesting to see where that goes. But nonetheless, I think it's several years down the road, but 2026 will be here before you know it. But nonetheless, I do feel that the players and the owners around Major League Baseball are set up for another battle because the spending from the big market teams, some of the big market teams, is going to continue. And it's not going to be all of them because you look at the Red Sox. The Red Sox have scaled back in recent years. The White Sox, they operate like a smaller market team. Same thing can be said for the Cubs right now. But when you think about the spending, it's right now it's the Mets, the Dodgers, the Yankees. Those are the teams that are really from the bigger markets that are going out there and spending the money. And you think about it, New York and LA, those are the two markets that you need to keep your league afloat. And what's going to happen with the Angels? Artie Moreno said, he's not selling the team anymore, but MLB definitely needs another influx of capital coming from that LA region. So we got to wait and see what happens. But nonetheless, this is a problem that is not going away. I think Major League Baseball last year decided to put a band-aid on a gash when it really needed to be stitched up. So let's see what is going to make of this problem, because the finances of it between the big market and small market teams are definitely not going away. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now, you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. CJ, as always, thank you for chiming in, and definitely to answer your question. In about 10 days, I'm going to start giving my division by division previews for the upcoming MLB season. So, in about 10 days from now. So, definitely stay tuned. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time once again to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. My name is William Martin. I'm signing off, saying take care and have a wonderful day. Be well, everybody.